Welcome, teachers. In this submodule, we are going to look at something very familiar, our classrooms. But we are going to look at them with a different lens. Not from the perspective of syllabus, not from the perspective of content, but from the perspective of how learning is happening. We often hear these words: traditional teaching, effective teaching, learner-centered classroom. But what do these actually look like in a real classroom? In this module, we will not talk in theory. We will look at classroom scenes, real situations, and slowly understand the difference. After the end of this submodule, you should be able to differentiate between teacher-led and learner-centered classroom practices using real classroom examples. Identify signs of rote learning, one-way teaching, and passive classrooms in your own teaching. Recognize the key features of effective pedagogy such as discussion, questioning, real-life connection, and interaction. Apply simple strategies to shift from lecture and copying to activity, discussion, and student thinking. And reflect on your own current classroom practices and plan one change to make learning more interactive and meaningful. Look at these two classrooms. On one side, the teacher is explaining, students are copying. On the other side, the teacher is discussing, students are involved in an activity. Now think of a typical class in your school. Which side does it look closer to? There is no judgment here, just observation. This table makes the difference very clear. In a teacher-led classroom, the teacher talks most of the time. Students listen quietly. The focus is on finishing the syllabus. In a learner-centered classroom, students talk and think. Students ask questions. The focus is on understanding. The biggest shift is this: from teacher doing the work to students doing the thinking. Here, both teachers are teaching the same topic, parts of a plant. But look closely. In one classroom, students are memorizing definitions. In the other, students are observing a real plant, asking questions, thinking. One classroom is finishing the syllabus, the other is building learning. This is the difference between rote learning and understanding. Let's now understand the difference between one-way teaching and interaction. One-way teaching is when the teacher explains continuously. Interaction is when students talk, think, respond, and the teacher adapts. In one-way teaching, the teacher has little idea of what students understood. In interaction, the teacher keeps checking understanding during teaching. This is a very important difference, because learning happens when classrooms become conversations and not monologues. This is the heart of an effective classroom. When students start speaking more than the teacher, when students start thinking, not just listening, that is when learning becomes deep. Let us see how this looks in a real classroom. In a one-way classroom, the teacher explains fractions for 20 minutes. Students copy. Teacher asks, "Did you understand?" Students nod. In an interactive classroom, the teacher asks, "When you share a roti between two people, how much does each get?" Students discuss, students answer differently, teacher listens and builds on responses. Same topic, very different learning. Now let us look at a few classroom scenarios across subjects. Observe how small changes in teaching approach create big changes in learning. Here we see that the concept of integers is being taught. On the left, the traditional way. The teacher asks students to memorize rules and equations. Students copy them into their notebooks without really understanding what the numbers represent. On the right, the effective way, the teacher connects integers to a real-life situation, temperature. If it is 2 degrees below zero, that means -2. Now students begin to relate. They think, they connect the idea to something they have experienced. The topic is the same, but the learning is deeper when children can connect concepts to real life. Because understanding integers is not about memorizing rules, it is about making sense of what those numbers mean. Here, the topic is nouns. On the left, the traditional way, the teacher writes the definition, students copy it into their notebooks, but many still do not fully understand what a noun really is. On the right, the affective way, the teacher asks students to give examples of a person, place, and a thing. Students respond. Now they are thinking, they are relating the concept to real examples around them. The definition remains the same, but understanding grows when students actively participate in the learning. In this slide, we see the difference between teaching writing as a task and teaching writing as thinking. On the left, the teacher asks the students to write an essay on my family using fixed sentences. Students simply copy. They complete the work, but they are not really thinking, imagining, or expressing. On the right, the teacher first helps the students generate ideas. Children talk about their family, share experiences, and create a word web together. Now, when they write, the words come from their own thoughts. This is the shift from copying sentences to expressing ideas. Rote writing finishes the exercise. Idea-based writing builds real writing skills. In this slide, both the teachers are teaching the same topic, shadow formation. On the left, the teacher explains the definition. Students quietly copy the sentence into their notebooks. They may remember the words, but they haven't experienced the idea. On the right, the teacher switches off the lights, uses a torch, and asks students to place their hands in front of the light. Students observe, laugh, experiment, and start noticing how the shadows change shapes and size. Now they are not memorizing a definition, they are discovering the concept. This is the difference between hearing about science and doing science. Here, students are enacting roles of kings and ministers. They are asking questions, discussing, participating. Role play turns a history lesson into an experience, and experience creates deeper learning. Another science class, we see students create a model of rivers, wells, ponds, and rain. They explain the model themselves. They are not memorizing names. They are understanding through creating and explaining. So what really changes? Students talk more than the teacher. Students think, not just listen. Students relate learning to real life. The teacher checks understanding during teaching. And most importantly, mistakes are allowed, because mistakes are part of learning. Now reflect on your own classroom. Which side is more visible? Teacher-led or learner-centered? Rote or understanding? One way or interaction?